Can you actually save money by moving onto a boat? I tracked every single penny I spent over the last 12 months, and the true cost of living on a boat is going to shock you. Here's where that question started for me. A few years ago, before I'd spent a single night aboard myself, I watched a man at a fuel dock explain to anyone within earshot that he had just solved the cost of living. He was moving onto a 40-foot sailboat, and the way he said it, rent was finished. No landlord, no mortgage, just him and the water and a fraction of the bills he used to pay. He'd run the numbers, he told us. The boat cost him less than 2 years of his old rent. I nodded along, because it sounded right, and because the math he'd done was the exact math almost everyone does when they picture this life. It was also the wrong math, and it took my own full year of tracking actual costs, every slip fee and pump out and repair, to understand precisely how wrong. His mistake wasn't the number he calculated. It was that he calculated one number, the purchase price, when living on a boat is at least a dozen numbers, and the loud one is the only one most people ever add up. So let's add up the rest of them in the order they tend to ambush people, because the cost of living on a boat is one of the most searched financial questions in boating and one of the most consistently answered wrong. Start with the number that man was so proud of, the boat itself. If you buy it outright, you've converted rent into a single purchase, which, on a spreadsheet, looks like a win. If you finance it, you've got a monthly payment shaped like a mortgage, sitting on top of an asset that loses value over time rather than gaining it. Either way, the purchase price is the figure everyone fixates on and the one with the least to do with your monthly cost of living. A boat is a platform you stand on to pay all the other costs. It is the entry fee, not the rent. And it's an entry fee that quietly shrinks while you hold it. The man at the fuel dock framed his boat as less than 2 years of rent, as though the money had been converted into something he'd keep. It hadn't. A boat is a depreciating asset, closer to a car than to a house in the way it sheds value, and the steepest drop tends to come early in a boat's life. The exact curve varies by builder, age, and how the market is moving, so I won't pretend there's a single percentage that fits every hull. But the direction never reverses. The rent he thought he'd escaped didn't disappear into equity. A chunk of it evaporated into depreciation, which is the one cost that doesn't send a monthly bill, and so the one almost nobody counts until they go to sell. The rent comes from where you keep it, and this is the largest line item for almost every liveaboard. A marina slip is priced by the foot, which means every foot of boat that man bought to feel good at the fuel dock is a foot he pays for every month, indefinitely. On top of the base slip rate, most marinas add a liveaboard fee, a separate surcharge for the specific act of sleeping aboard rather than storing the boat empty. Combine the two, and a liveaboard slip commonly runs from a few $100s a month at a quiet inland marina to well over $1,000 in a desirable coastal city. And in the most competitive harbors, the slip alone can match the rent on an apartment in the same neighborhood. The man at the fuel dock had budgeted $0 for this, because in his head, the boat replaced rent. The slip is rent. He had simply moved it to a place he hadn't looked yet. This is the fork that decides the entire question, and it's worth slowing down on. There's a second way to keep a boat, and it's the method the people who genuinely live cheaply on the water actually use. They don't rent a slip. They anchor out, or pick up a mooring bull, which costs a fraction of a marina slip and in some anchorages costs nothing. Anchoring is the lever that moves boat life from roughly the price of an apartment to genuinely cheaper than anything on land. But the lever has a cost attached, because the moment you leave the dock, you lose the marina's electricity, its water supply, and its waste service, and every one of those becomes your personal responsibility. The savings are real. They just relocate, the same way the man's rent relocated, into categories he hadn't counted yet. Electricity is the first to reappear. At a dock, you plug into shore power and pay for electricity like a normal utility. Or it's bundled into the slip. On the anchor, there is no cord. This is why the most common serious upgrade among full-time liveaboards is a do-it-yourself solar power setup for off-grid living. A solar array, a charge controller, a battery bank, and an inverter let the boat run its lights, refrigeration, electronics, and water pumps off sunlight instead of a marina pedestal. A do-it-yourself solar setup ranges widely with how much power you need, from a few $100s for a modest system that covers lights and devices, up to several thousand for a bank large enough to run refrigeration and full-time comfort. Notice what that expense actually is, though. It's paid once, and in exchange, it deletes a recurring utility bill and, more importantly, removes the reason you needed the slip in the first place. The solar isn't a power cost. It's the capital expense that unlocks the single biggest saving available to anyone living aboard, which is escaping the slip fee entirely. Run that as a payback calculation, and the logic gets blunt. If a live-aboard slip is costing somewhere north of $1,000 a month in a desirable harbor, and a capable solar setup is a one-time outlay in the low thousands, the array pays for itself in a matter of months, not years, the moment it lets you trade the dock for the anchorage. After that, the sunlight is free and the slip fee is gone. That's the inversion the man at the fuel dock never saw. He treated the boat as the purchase that ended his bills. The purchase that actually moves the cost of living needle isn't the boat at all. It's the few $1,000s of panels and batteries that let him stop paying rent to a marina, and he hadn't budgeted a dollar for it because nobody sells the dream that way. Then comes water, and its unglamorous counterpart, which the brochures skip, and every live-aboard eventually confronts. Boat marine toilet maintenance? A boat doesn't tie into a city sewer. Most run a marine head, a specialized toilet that pumps into a holding tank, which you then empty at a pump-out station, often for a small per-visit fee or legally offshore where the rules permit. The head is a system, and systems have running costs. The hoses, the joker valve, the pump seals, the tank sensors, all of it needs periodic attention, and a neglected marine head fails in ways that are expensive to fix and impossible to ignore in a cabin the size of a walk-in closet. The line item people remember is the pump-out fee. The line item that actually gets them is the replacement parts and the labor. Because on a boat, you are not the tenant calling the super. You are the super. And the head is the system that proves it fastest. A pump-out is a few dollars each time, which sounds trivial until you're doing it weekly and it becomes a standing monthly cost. A holding tank sensor or a length of sanitation hose is cheap as a part and miserable as a job, and the day the system backs up is the day you learn that the cost of a marine head was never the toilet. It was the ongoing maintenance contract you signed with yourself the moment you moved aboard, payable in money on the good months and in a very bad afternoon on the rest. Before the big irregular expenses, there's a category that does the quiet damage. The one a year of penny tracking exposes that a single budget never does, the small recurring costs. Cooking propane you refill rather than pipe in, laundromat runs because most boats carry no washer, connectivity, whether that's a cellular plan or a satellite service if you intend to work from the water, fuel, both for moving the boat and for a backup generator on the stretch of cloudy days your solar can't cover, and the cost of simply getting to shore when you're anchored out, which means a dinghy with its own motor, its own fuel, and its own maintenance, or a dinghy dock fee back at the marina. Individually, none of these is large. Together, they routinely add a few $100s a month, and they are exactly the dollars that vanish from a plan made at a fuel dock and reappear on a bank statement at the end of the month. So, here's where this lands for you, specifically if you're doing the same math that man did. The question is not whether a boat is cheaper than your apartment. The question is which version of boat life you're actually willing to live, because there are two of them wearing the same name, and they cost wildly different amounts. If you want the marina, the shore power, the easy water, and the convenience, you should run your numbers expecting something close to the rent you're trying to escape, because that's what the data keeps showing. If you want it genuinely cheap, you're signing up to anchor out, to live off solar, to maintain your own head, and to be your own utility company. Decide which person you are before you buy the boat, not after, because the boat doesn't care which one you assumed you'd be. Now, the costs that arrive on no calendar but always arrive? Insurance first. And live-aboard insurance is its own pricier, pickier category because the insurer knows the boat is your home and sits in the water full-time rather than on a trailer most of the year. Then haul out and bottom work. Roughly once a year, the boat comes out of the water to be cleaned, inspected, and repainted below the waterline, since anything submerged in seawater grows things, and that haul-out lands as one large annual bill rather than a smooth monthly cost. And then the category that defines the whole enterprise, the unplanned failure. On a boat, the question was never whether something expensive breaks. It's only when and how many things break in the same month. A bilge pump dies, a battery bank gives out, a leak needs a diver, an engine refuses to start the one weekend you needed it. The liveaboards who pull off the cheap version are not the ones who avoided these. They're the ones who treated repairs as a fixed monthly line in the budget, money set aside every month for the failure that hasn't happened yet, so that when it does, it's an inconvenience instead of a crisis. The figure scales with the age and complexity of the boat, but the principle doesn't move. A boat without a repair fund isn't a cheaper life. It's a slower motion version of the same expensive one, with the bill deferred rather than removed. It's worth noticing who benefits from the version of this story the man at the fuel dock believed. The marinas that charge a liveaboard premium have every reason to keep the dock looking like the default, comfortable plug-in option. The brokers who sell the boat are paid on the purchase price, the one number that flatters the dream, and not on the slip fees or the haul-outs or the head repairs that follow. The entire economy around boat life is structured to make the entry fee feel like the whole price, because the entry fee is the part someone else collects a commission on. None of that is a conspiracy. It's just incentives pointing the same direction, and the direction they point is straight at a man at a fuel dock confidently announcing he's about to have his cost of living. He didn't have it. I know, because I went and lived the year he only imagined, and I tracked every penny of it. The slip he forgot to budget, the head that needed rebuilding in month 7, the haul out, the small monthly bleed of propane and laundry and fuel to get to shore. By the end, the number sat much closer to the apartment he'd left than to the fantasy he'd calculated. And the only people I met who'd actually beaten the cost of living on land were the ones anchored out, running off solar, maintaining everything themselves, paying in labor what the marina crowd paid in dollars. The cost of living on a boat was never high or low. It was a dial, and he'd grabbed it expecting it to be set to cheap when it shipped from the factory set to the apartment. I still think about him at that fuel dock, certain he'd solved it, telling strangers the boat cost less than 2 years of rent. He was right about the boat. It was every other number that got him. The boat was the only one he ever counted.